Chains, Chapter 40. Just after the new year came, word of another shocking victory for the rebels, this one at Princeton in New Jersey. Washington's troops chased the British from the battlefield and killed a passel of them and took a couple hundred prisoners. Folks could scarce credit this neither. Colonel Hawkins let out a roar in the study when the news was delivered and hit the unfortunate messenger on the head with a rolled up map. Then he called for his horse and galloped off to the headquarters. Within a day, the British promised boiled peas and rice with butter twice a week for their American prisoners, but they still did not allow fires in the Bridewell cells. The men had to eat their meat raw. Their chamber pots froze solid at night. The master's trip to London was moved up so that he could deliver the news of setbacks to Parliament and the King. Madame had finally accommodated herself to the notion of his voyage and had found a new way to turn it into her advantage. Whilst we prepared for Lockton's clothes for the journey, she wrote out a long list of items she wanted him to buy in England. I kept to the kitchen and the cellar and the woodpile when she was awake, but made my trips up the island each day before dawn, looking over my shoulder at every sound, choosing a different path every day. The constant worry at my hole in my belly. Curzon was stronger and told me not to fret, for he was not coughing up blood and his bowels were in fine working order, but he always asked me to come back on the morrow. The day of the master's departure, I roused myself extra early on account that I feared Madame might do the same. I deposited stale rolls and burnt hunks of pork on the window sill of Curzon's cell, then crossed the commons on my way to the pump. There were a few folks out on their own early morning errands, all bundled in cloaks and blankets, coats and shawls and scarfs wrapped high. "You there!" said a loud voice. Everyone stopped to look. "You there, girl!" Oh no. A British soldier hurried towards me. I relaxed some when I saw his face. It was the mountain-sized guard who had let me visit Curzon's cell when he was first imprisoned, the one who liked to eat. "Haven't seen you around," he said near me. I bobbed quickly. "The rules don't allow civilians in cells." He lowered his rifle to the ground and eyed my bucket. True enough. What'd you bring him today?" "Bread crust and burnt meat, sir." He wrinkled his nose. "What about yesterday?" "Yesterday was kidney pie and stale almond cake, sir." He shook his head and licked his lips. "I'm sorry I missed that, I am. Wouldn't hurt to drop off a bite now and then to one such as myself, would it?" "No, sir," I answered. "I shall remember that." He tilted his head on the side. "Your master ever hire you out?" 'Twas common in those days for folks to hire out their slaves to make money. The slaves did not see the money, of course, but if I had the chance to work away from the prying eyes of Madame, I'd be grateful for it. "Yes, sir," I lied. "We need a maid to clean out the cells. Dying men do puke out some terrible things, they do. You're a steadfast girl. Tell your mistress we'd pay her the going rate for your services." "I shall tell her, sir." He shouldered his rifle. "I'm on night watch now. My name is Fisher. Bring me round some cake, and I'll keep an eye on your brother." "Thank you, Mr. Fisher, sir. I shall. No kidney pie, though. Kidney sour my gut, something terrible." The master left for London with much muttering on the part of his wife. She did not take to her bed as I expected, but was driven around the home of Mrs. Taylor to play cards and no doubt complain about her husband. While she was gone, Sarah birthed her baby boy in the cellar. I was sore tempted to sneak down the stairs and watch. I'd seen kittens and calves come out into the world, but not babies. I had a powerful curiosity about it, but I dared not. I kept the water boiling, for the midwife was stuck cloth in my ears to keep out the noise. When Sarah stopped hollering, I crept down the stairs to see the babe. He was a round-headed, fat fellow with big eyes and bigger ears. "George," Sarah called him. "You named him after the king?" Hannah asked. "Perhaps," Sarah said cheerfully. "We never figured the colonists would hold on for this long. My man was saying the other night that maybe the king should stop the war. Maybe the babe and us might stay here and not sail home. Plenty of room here," he said. She kissed the baby's nose. "A name like George is a good one on either side of the ocean." Shh, warned Mary. The next day, Sarah and her George moved to a house set aside for new mothers attached to the army. I was sad to see them go, for I wanted to hold the little one and make him laugh. Lady Seymour wanted to hear all of the details about the new baby. I thought maybe I could visit Sarah and ask her to bring the little lad by. Something about a baby always brings old folks back to life. When I mentioned this notion to the lady, she just shook her head. Not until this pestilence has left my lungs. She coughed into a stained handkerchief. Heaven knows when that will be. Her health was changeable and flighty. One day she felt strong and lively, and she'd eat 3 meals and drink a gallon of tea, and the next she'd lie abed with a fever, looking so poorly it tempted Madam to order the coffin to be made. I went to place another log in the fire. Lady Seymour was lying propped up on pillows in her bed. She shook her head. No more wood. I'm warm enough. Please sit down, Isabel. Ma'am? I would like you to sit down, either in the chair or on the edge of the bed. I should like to talk to you. It was improper for a servant to sit with a lady as though they were companions, but she asked me direct, so I sat myself in the chair that was close to the fire. I could not figure out what we needed to conversate on. She hadn't sent me for a newspaper or sweets for days and days. Had I displeased her? Thank you. She sat back and used her right hand to place her left one in her lap. I will soon meet my Maker, Isabel. I am a sinner, and I am in need of forgiveness. I relaxed. 'Twas the pull of death that made old people go funny. Miss Mary Finch went the same way towards the end. Clouds would roll into her eyes, and she would talk nonsense for hours. Me and Ruth, we sat polite and listened. The trick with addled old folks is to be agreeable. We all seek forgiveness, Lady Seymour. I wanted to buy you, she said. I wasn't sure I had heard right. Beg your pardon, ma'am? I tried to buy you from Anne after I first met you. She refused, and we argued like a pair of fishwives. I rather lost my temper, she chuckled. I hadn't done that for 30 years. I knew not what to say. She studied her useless hand. When Elihu returned from exile, I should have demanded you be placed in my household. I was horrified by your treatment, and of course, your poor sister. But then, the fire, her gaze returned to the hearth. I regret I did not force the matter. You would have suited my household. I would have it would have eased her mind if I had thanked her for wanting to buy me away from Madam. I tried to be grateful, but I could not. A body does not like being bought and sold like a basket of eggs, even if the person who cracks the shells is kind. Isabel? She awaited some word from me. I did not know how to explain myself. It was like talking to her maid, Angelica, who was so much like me and at the same time so much different. We two had no strings of words that could tie us together. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for telling me this. That's all I could muster. Forgive me, she said. I'm a clumsy old woman. There was a shout at the drawing room upstairs, where Colonel Hawkins and his men had been meeting. I stood. The soldier wives are all visiting Sarah. I should go on, she said, closing her eyes. Colonel Hawkins was in the right foul mood on account of all forms he had to fill out and reports that were late. The war seemed fought with as much paper as bullets. What with the letters and the passes and the permissions piled up on the table, orders received and recorded, recordings on conferences noted down. When I entered, he hollered that the room was colder than a barn, and called me a manner of rude names. I chose the wood for his fire very carefully, the greenest, dampest logs in the entire wood pile, guaranteed to smolder and sputter without giving off any heat, and even less light. After a frigid hour, he left for headquarters. It took all my might not to crack a smile. The grandfather clock ticked off the minutes. Madam would not return home for a goodly while. She was a terrible card player, but she had loads of money to lose, so her companions would keep her at the faro table as long as possible. I peeked in Lady Seymour's room. She was wrapped up in her coverlet and sleeping. The blankets barely moved when she took a breath. I pulled out Common Sense from its hiding place and read by the firelight. In truth, there were some pages that I jumped over, for I found it hard to figure out their meaning. But I gathered many of his thoughts. Americans had a good cause to overthrow their British masters. A person born to wealth was not born to rule over others, and 'twas good and proper to fight injustice. I kept the mending basket close at hand in case I needed to hide my crime.